women and children, an alarming and rising trend of migration. The following stories should cause our stomachs to churn. Zazel, who was only 11 years old, was forced to live with a 40-year-old man. She cooked, cleaned, and was forced to have sex. Zazel became pregnant at 14 and had a baby. The alarming thing is that her father approved of it, and the villagers were silent about it. Another young girl named Rosita, who was 12 years old, and was the target of sexual desires of a 45-year-old man. He paid a small dowry to her parents and received a piece of paper to confirm that it was a valid marriage arrangement. Rosita was raped during the act of the so-called marriage consummation. She got pregnant and had a baby at the age of 14. Cham is a 19-year-old girl from rural Cambodia. One day, a broker arrived to her village promising her a very good-paying factory job in China. After obtaining enough money, she said goodbye to her family and set out on a new adventure. She expected to make good money to send back to her family. Her dreams were shattered when she arrived. Cham was forced to marry an older man who repeatedly abused her, both physically and sexually. With all her documents confiscated, she was trapped as an indentured servant. According to UNICEF, there are more than 700 million women alive who were married before their 18th birthday. More than 1 in 3, or about 250 million, had entered into marriage union or became a child bride before age 15, like Zazel and Rosita. According to one estimate, 14.2 million girls annually, or 39,000 daily, will marry too young. In several countries, taking a child bride has become a cover for pedophilia to avoid the penalties of the law. Foreign brides, like the case of Cham, who come from Southeast Asian countries of Cambodia, Vietnam, Indonesia, Thailand, and the Philippines, have been sought after especially by men from Taiwan, Japan, China, and South Korea. Their numbers could run into the hundreds of thousands. In general, feminization of migration in Asia and across the globe has increased significantly in recent years, and the child bride phenomenon is part of this trend. Not surprisingly, the Bible has a lot to say about protecting these vulnerable individuals. Even in normal circumstances, children were already vulnerable. The infant mortality rate in the first century Palestine was about 30%. Nearly a third of all babies died before the age of 1. It is estimated that half of the children would not make it to the age of 12. Being an infant in the time of Jesus was definitely a risky business. In times of war and violence, children suffered the most. Many became orphans. Others ended up as refugees, beggars, or slaves. The children of our world today are also not free from danger and risk. In 2019, there were about 30 million children worldwide who became immigrants. An estimated 10 million were refugees who were forcibly displaced from their country, and another 17 million were internally displaced due to conflict and violence. Many of these children were at grave risk of human trafficking, sexual violence, exploitation, family separation, and emotional trauma. All across the globe, millions of children are being uprooted, driven from their homes, deprived of education, and facing starvation. In August 2017, a surge of violence began that forced about 1 million Rohingya refugees to flee Myanmar and cross the border into Bangladesh. About 60%, or 683,000 of them, were children. Many of these Rohingya children walked for days to make it to an already overcrowded makeshift refugee camp. They arrive exhausted, sick, and in desperate need of humanitarian assistance. The Rohingya are an ethnic group, mostly Muslims, who have lived in Western Myanmar for centuries, yet they are stateless, unrecognized as citizens by the Myanmar government. Thus, they face discrimination, violence, and extreme poverty. Most of these children are deprived of education and are at real risk of becoming a lost generation. Girls and women are at particular risks of sexual abuse and trafficking. On the United States and Mexico border, the U.S. Border Patrol apprehended nearly 69,000 unaccompanied children in 2014, 40,000 in 2015, and 60,000 in 2016. 61% of these apprehended unaccompanied minors in 2016 were from El Salvador and Guatemala. The U.S. is bracing for a 20-year high in numbers of migrants arriving at the southern border, including thousands of children who are being kept in government-run detention facilities that critics say are inhumane. More than 100,000 people in total were stopped from trying to cross into the U.S. in February. As of March 21st this year, U.S. Customs and Border Patrol agents were holding more than 15,500 unaccompanied children in custody, according to U.S. media. The record-breaking influx of children has left U.S. immigration officials scrambling for solutions to a growing humanitarian crisis. Why are they coming? Experts say the reason for migration are varied. Poverty, gang crime, and natural disasters are some reasons that migrants may feel pushed to leave their home countries. Pandemic-related job losses could be adding to the surge this time too, in this pandemic time. Protecting those most vulnerable, particularly widows and orphans, is God's central concern. The Bible ensured their protection through legislation. The Torah states, quote, "For the Lord your God is God of gods and Lord of lords, the great God, mighty and awesome, who is not partial and takes no bride, who executes justice for the orphan and the widow, and who loves the strangers, providing them food and clothing." Deuteronomy chapter 10, verses 17. The prophet Zechariah also exhorted the people of this time, reminding them that this is what God required of them, saying, quote, "Render true judgments, show kindness and mercy to one another. Do not oppress the widow, the orphan, the alien, or the poor." Zechariah 7, verses 9 to 10. In the New Testament, James points out that there is a deep connection between faith and action, stating, "Religion is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this, to care for orphans and widows in their distress. James chapter 1, verse 27. Jesus, of course, was also very protective of children. When Jesus saw that the children were prevented from seeing him, he said, "Let the children come to me. Do not stop them, for it is to such as these that the kingdom of God belongs. Truly I tell you, whoever does not receive the kingdom of God as a little child will never enter it." And he took them up in his arms, laid his hands on them, and blessed them. On another occasion, an argument started among the disciples as to which of them would be the greatest. Jesus, knowing their thoughts, placed a little child by his side and said to them, "Whoever welcomes this child in my name welcomes me." Children are precious gifts from God. We must do everything possible to protect and nurture them. There are dire consequences for neglecting and mistreating them. Jesus says, "Take care that you do not despise one of these little ones. For I tell you, in heaven their angels continually see the face of my Father in heaven." Jesus didn't just talk about protecting children. He demonstrated it in his actions. Some notable examples of Jesus healing children are curing the daughter of a foreign woman, curing a Roman soldier's son, casting a demon out of a boy, raising a girl and a boy to life, curing a centurion's servant. Disturbing ordeals of women and children across the globe today should cause all of us to feel compassion, as Jesus has often felt. The Greek word for compassion is splagchnizomai, which is literally translated to be moved in one's bowels or in the inward parts. Hence, to feel compassion is to be moved so deeply by something that one feels it in the pit of one's stomach. This Greek word is frequently used to describe Jesus' emotion that almost always led him to action. The Latin root for the word compassion is compati, which literally means to suffer with. However, compassion is much more than just feeling sympathy or even apathy with someone suffering. Compassion prompts a person to act on someone's behalf. That is why the Merriam-Webster dictionary defines compassion as the sympathetic consciousness of others' distress together with the desire to alleviate it. Taking action or getting involved to do something about a distressful situation is what separates compassion from sympathy and empathy. Having genuine compassion changes the way we live and affects the world around us. We must never remain silent in the face of injustice, but act in the way the Bible beckons us. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and the needy.